and we've got a full day planned. So I want to thank everybody for joining, and remind everybody to keep yourselves on mute unless you do want to share. And indeed, I certainly encourage people to share and to come forth and speak forth. If there's comments and questions we want to get after here. Welcome everybody to June. It's great to take a deep breath after May, because after the Home and Garden Show, I don't know about you all, but we were pretty wiped out. It was a busy time for everybody. Congratulations to everybody that was there. We'll be talking about the financial results as we get into it. But you can see from the first slide we have on here, and this is repeated from what was in e-news. Lots and lots of folks helped this year, and so huge appreciation to everyone that made it a huge success, that made it a great success. And I certainly can share. And Terry, Robin, I'll look for your comments now. I felt that both the attendees as well as the vendors were just thrilled that we were back in for a face-to-face show, and that we were able to host it so successfully. Terry, Robin, any comments?
Well, I got the same thing. It's like everybody was so happy to be there, and they were, I didn't see anybody worrying about COVID or wearing a mask or worrying about being around people. Everybody was just happy to be there. And they did well, most of them. Most of the vendors did really well. It was nice. Some of the vendors said to me, quite a few of them, like, I did better this weekend than I have the whole year, last year. So it just shows you how bad their businesses were, not being able to get out there.
I know of 3 people that came down with coronavirus that attended that. I was just wondering if there's any more.
I mean, we only have 2 that were reported. So that's all I heard of. I didn't hear of anyone else.
Anytime you have a huge group like that, somebody's, going to be carrying it or something, but.
And I want to be cautious about attributing cause to being at the event, right? There may be proximity, or maybe that, contagion certainly would have been around, but I would hesitate to attribute the Home and Garden Show as the cause of an infection. Terry, any comments from you though, with respect to your reflections on the show?
Yes, I just thought our members were sensational. So many volunteered, including all of the trainees helped in one way or another, and some were there all 4 days. So it just makes a huge difference to our show when we have that many of our members helping. And everybody was so flexible and easy to work with. I just can't say enough about our members. They are just terrific, and I'm very excited about the new group as well, because they're also very wonderful to be around. And to me, the most satisfying part of these events we do is just getting to see our members and talk in person to people. I personally have missed that greatly over the last couple of years. So I really enjoy this opportunity to get to know people again and renew friendships. So it was a great show, and I can't thank people enough. And we made money. We made lots of money.
So with that, we'll get in and talk about the program later on during the board meeting, and we'll review some of the particulars here. So for today, I'll go through the usual administrivia of our June to-dos from the OSU calendar. Lots of announcements and updates we're going to go through here today. And we'll be joined in a few moments here by Katie Buckley. Dr. Buckley leads the Washington Department of Agriculture Pollinator Health Task Force. And so she's all about pollinators, and I'm very eager to hear from her, and she's very eager to share with us. So birthdays. Elizabeth, I know you're on, and Barbara, you're here today, and so happy birthday to you all. Alina, happy birthday to you. As you just get into it here. So it's a busy month. Do Elizabeth, Barbara, Alina, you have any special plans for birthdays this month?
Yes, I'm going camping with my grandkids for 2 weeks. Oh, all right.
So
Good for
we're
you.
celebrating my birthday somewhere in California.
Congratulations.
How old are your grandkids?
They are 13 and 6.
Whoa, you're brave.
I think she's brave to go camping for 2 weeks. Like,
Right.
camping for a weekend is okay, but 2 weeks, you're
That's
not
brave.
We bought a trailer 2 years ago, so makes it a
easy.
lot easier with grandkids.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, congratulations to Elizabeth, Barbara, Alina, who are with us here today. I know that Sharon Golightly is actually celebrating her birthday. Her son flew her down to Los Angeles for I think a Bocelli concert at the Hollywood Bowl. So so I know that Sharon's having a good time. Okay, so an incredibly busy month for training, as you can see here. So training on the 4th, training coming up this Saturday on the 18th. And another session on the 25th, and we'll talk more about that as we get into the training. Study group is next Monday on the 20th. The Zoom link is in eNews, and it's the same Zoom link as we've been using in past months for the study group. So if there's so again, check eNews for and the particulars on that. Jude, Midge, any comments in terms of study group this month? Any prep? Any teaser for us?
Is Midge on?
I don't see Midge, but
Okay, then I'll say something. Brenda Priestley, one of our coordinators, is going to be giving us a presentation on permaculture. And we're supposed to be doing some reading about that so we can all discuss it in an intelligent way. It's a growing effort among commercial agriculture, in fact, much less home gardening, which we should be trying to do all the time. So hope a lot of people will tune in. It's an easy way to do a meeting.
an easy way for a continuing education hour next Monday at 1 p.m. per the Zoom link. Thanks, Jude. And then, of course, in July, a quick go ahead to July is that the graduation for our 2022 cohort is on July 9th. And this will be at the Emmanuel Baptist Church. Alina, I know you just sent in your email, it's 1 to 3 p.m., not 1 to 4 p.m. So 1 to 3 p.m. Alina, Brenda, any comments? I know you're looking for folks to RSVP for that event. Alina, Brenda, any comments?
I don't have anything at this time. I'm kind of the one that's heading up the launch, and Elena at this time is in charge of planning the graduation. So I don't have any other details.
Very good. Well, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about that, and again, more training as we get into the times.
Yeah, Kelly, I would like to encourage everybody who can to attend that graduation. It is a big deal for them, the trainees, and it's a big deal for us because this is a great group of people that we can welcome into our midst.
Absolutely second that point. Again, as Terry noted early on, all of the trainees participated actively in the Home and Garden Show, and that's great to have that level of participation. And as Jude, as you're noting, this is an exceptional class that really has worked hard and has demonstrated prowess and commitment to the program. So July 9th for this graduation is a big deal.
And Kelly, one more time, where is it?
Okay, now that I'm back on, I just wanted to say it's going to be at the Emmanuel Baptist Church in Hoquiam. So
Okay.
Jude, you should be familiar with that location. It's going to be from 1 to 3. We had to change the time from 1 to 3 instead of 1 to 4. And you can RSVP with me on my email because I can get emails. I just won't be able to get phone calls because I'll be gone from June 20th to July 6th. So RSVP, I want to know how many people are coming, guests, family, everyone's invited. anybody, you know, our members are invited, our instructors, our mentors. I just need to know how many tables and chairs to put up. So if you would RSVP me on email or Brenda on her phone by July 6th, that would be great. So then I can tell the church how chairs and tables are set up. That's all I have to say.
Very good. And Garnet, you should be able to see the screen, right? You know, I am screen sharing,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah,
okay, very
Yeah.
good.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry. I was so intent on putting it in my calendar, I didn't look up. Sorry.
July 9th, bring a friend, bring a stranger, you know, grab somebody off the street and go to graduation.
Elena, I have some questions for you. This is Cindy. I just opened my emails and it said a different location for this was sent out in an email. So it was somewhere in Aberdeen, I thought. Stuart.
Yeah, so this is Alina, you want to report, this is a change. You just had a recent change in address, right?
Well, okay, I've gotten both of these today, so this is this is kind of a weird. And the other thing is that the trainees are asking about this. So please, would you give them a direct email on this topic, because with all the correct information, because they are asking us and we don't know. You're the one that's planning it, so you need to communicate directly with the trainees and the executive committee about what's going on, and then I think you'll get a better response. Okay, that's it from me.
Okay. So Alina, Brenda, you got that from Cindy?
I got knocked off again, sorry.
So what Cindy's saying is that there's some confusion because of the emails in terms of the location, and she's encouraging you and or Brenda to communicate directly with the trainees to clarify the time and the location of the graduation.
I'm sending out the invitation today. My life has been really hectic the last 2 days, so I'm sort of going by my sails in the wind right now. But let me just remind you of what's here on the screen, that it's going to be at the Emmanuel Baptist Church. We had to change that location from where it was to the Emmanuel Baptist Church yesterday. The celebration will be from 1 to 3 instead of 1 to 4. And please RSVP to me at my email address, because I will be gone from June 20th to July 6th, or call Brenda. And I was talking and I was knocked off. Everybody is invited, mentors,
Yep.
all of our members, families of the trainees. I just need to know by July 6th how many tables and chairs to have the church set up.
Yep. Yeah, we heard that. Yeah, we got that.
Okay.
All good. Okay, so all good for the 9th.
Mhm.
Now, the other big event, of course, in July is our garden tour on the 23rd. And this is the new poster for the tour on the 23rd of July. Terry, comments and perspectives in terms of instructions for us here today on this. We, of course, we'll be having another foundation meeting on July 12th ahead of this. So we'll be able to confer about the tour ahead of July 23rd. But this is definitely something to put on everybody's calendar and to think about participating as a docent, certainly as participating for your plants.
Yes, it's another one of our big events where we raise money for our foundation, and we need a lot of docents. We have garden reps for all of the 6 gardens, and they are really a wonderful collection of gardens that are that you wouldn't just drive by and be able to see. They're all a little off on dead-end streets or unusual streets. So it'll be a really fun garden tour, because I think that there's such a nice range of gardens, from kind of wonderful eclectic gardens to very groomed and manicured park-like gardens. And we have one garden that's a retired gentleman, and he has a fabulous large vegetable garden. So I think there's just something for everyone on this garden tour.
So Terry, excuse me, can you tell us where it is again?
The far east side of the tour is right off the Devonshire exit. So the very edge of Montesano. And then there's two in Central Park, one in the B Street area of Aberdeen, one in South Aberdeen, and one up in Aberdeen Highlands, which is above the hospital. It's that road up the hospital. And the poster photograph is actually a picture from that garden.
Thanks. And will it be a similar setup as last time with porta potties, or do you have any plans?
Yes, we will have porta potties at the plant sale, which is going to be in a great location. It's next door to Barbara Porter's house on the edge of Hoquiam. It's right on Sumner Avenue. There will be a few vendors even, and it's a nice location for a plant sale with lots of people able to just spot it driving by to the garden tour coming from the west.
Do you think you might want to have some further towards Montesano, that direction, just because that's a long drive to Hoquiam and a slow street, you know?
Well, there's a lot of businesses along the way.
Oh, true. Yeah.
On this tour, we don't have any of our members on the tour. So I kind of hesitate to ask other people to have porta potties. But this garden tour is not, the gardens aren't as remote as they were last year when we had gardens up the Satsuk River.
Mm-hmm. So you might tell people to go to the Starbucks, drive to Aberdeen and go to the Starbucks, or what businesses would you suggest? Or we can work it out.
Yeah, let's pick up on that detail as we get a little bit later. If I think it's here on June 14th that it's probably a little earlier to think about where we're going to go to the bathroom on July 23rd. But that's okay. Kathleen, I appreciate your questions and your comments and so forth.
I want to cut in for just a moment. There is actually an app that tells you where there are bathrooms available.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, we could put that in the tour booklet.
It's called Flush.
What is it called?
Flush, as in flushing your toilet.
Okay.
Why don't you put that in the chat there, Garnet?
Okay. I sometimes have a little trouble managing chat. Let's see if I can, to everyone. Okay.
Okay. Hey, thanks much. Thanks much, Garnet, for sure.
Okay.
That would be worth it for all of us, actually, at any time.
That be nice to put into the e-news. So Garnet, you could send it to me. That'd be great. And
Okay, well, supposedly I'm putting it into chat right now.
chat. I not heard of chat before.
Yeah, it's part of a
comes up
Zoom.
on-
It's a Zoom function. It'll pop up for you, John. We'll bring you in the 21st
If I
century.
do it right.
Okay. Anyway, thanks much. We'll talk more about the tour here coming up. Quick reminder then about who we are. Of course, we meet here today as a foundation, and this is again we repeat this this point every meeting so as to remind ourselves about who we are as a foundation, a nonprofit, a Washington State nonprofit with specific intent to raise money to support our program needs and to come together to socialize, to learn together. This is so the foundation is distinct from the program, and the program, of course, is that we're all master gardeners for WSU. So for the foundation, right, reminder about who our 2022 elected board is. PJ, of course, is our president. Somewhere between here and Alaska. PJ, where are you today physically? You may be on mute, but are you hopefully you're somewhere coming into you'll be somewhere close to Fairbanks in a few months here. Sabine's our president. Go ahead.
Hi,
Yes.
Kelly. I just got bounced out. Sorry. I'm actually in Fairbanks, or I wouldn't have been able to talk to anyone because there is no connectivity between Dawson Creek and Fairbanks. Really, none. Phone, nothing. Unless Moose have set up some sort of private cell phone line. It is 78 degrees. They desperately need water here. But it is basically 24 hours of sunshine. So last night we, upon arrival, actually didn't realize it, but we stayed up till 3 a.m. to talk with our friends and didn't realize we are not 3 a.m. stay or uppers. So this morning came early because we're an hour behind you all. So hello from Fairbanks.
PJ, it'll be fun to hear your weather reports and of course your moose reports, as you go on here. And thank you very much for taking the
moose report, Kelly.
Thank you so very much for taking the effort to hang in
Thank
there
you.
and commit for these last few months here, given that you're
Absolutely.
just a few miles away from Grays Harbor, Pacific County.
Just a few.
But did you say it was 78 degrees?
Yes. For
In Alaska?
23 hours. Yes, it's very warm.
Jeez.
They have a
According
lot
to
of,
the national news, it's one of the states that's having troubles with forest fires.
yes, that's true. There are 2 northwest and northeast of here.
So PJ, I think that I can speak for all of us. We'll be expecting a little garden missives from Alaska
And
here.
you're going to get them.
Anyway, thanks so very much for that
Thank
feedback.
you,
Of course,
everyone.
reminder, of course, also that Tony Gwynn is our liaison with our faculty liaison with WSU. Alina and Brenda are our coordinators, right? So they're our direct link into the WSU program. And of course, just always the present reminder here that John, Margie, Terry, and Cindy are always looking for support and looking for volunteers. And we as a service organization, right, we have that expectation that we will step forward and we will participate as volunteers in the many programs that we engage with. Again, I hope that you all find the same delight in volunteering as we do. We had a plant clinic here in Owaka just this past weekend, and it was great to actually go face to face with public who were coming forward to ask just a variety of questions ranging from plant ID to pest problems. And it was a reminder about how important and how valued we are as a service organization to the public. Okay, on to June to-dos from Oregon State University. Trellis time is a particular point that Oregon State is making a point of right now, is that it's time to stake up all of the supports. I noticed that our peonies in particular, just commenting on that this morning, our peonies are needing some stalk supports as the floral heads of the peonies are going to be especially heavy this year, and for whatever reason, and they're going to need extra supports. So trellising. And then of course in maintenance and cleanup, there's an amazing amount of new spring growth that needs to be addressed here in terms of thinning and pruning. And it talks here about watering sufficiently for raised beds. It's hard to imagine any of us need any more water than we've had over the past few weeks here. And a reminder on the lawn care is that that nitrogen. It is time to put more nitrogen out on the lawns, and a caution, of course, about the amount of nitrogen per the square foot, the square footage there. Okay. Pest monitoring. We're going to be talking with Dr. Buckley here about pollinator health. And what we can do in our home habitats to encourage pollinators. And so I love the phrase insectary plants that are especially beneficial for pollinators. And it's a reminder that there's actually a publication, that Pacific Northwest publication 550, to encourage beneficial insects in your garden. There's some great stuff you can be doing and planning even now, right, to ensure that we have adequate pollinator activities. And of course, those of us that adhere to a no mow May, the no mow May tribe, we actually found quite a bit of pollinators that emerged as we let our lawns go a little bit longer in May. Okay, houseplants. Clear suggestion from OSU to move houseplants outside, and let them enjoy some fresh air. And by the way, this was some of the questions we had at the plant clinic at, this past weekend, that a lot of folks had let their houseplants go for several years, and clearly root bound and diseased houseplants were among the many questions we had at the clinic this past weekend. Other comments with respect to what you all are doing in your gardens for June here? Any other thoughts? Any other comments in terms of what you all are doing with your June gardens? Anyone?
Well, staking up things that are going to get knocked over by the rain, like peonies, for instance.
Absolutely. And the rain, indeed, we can certainly get the wind and some heavy rain, as we certainly have had over this past couple weeks.
Yeah.
What else?
My
Al-
soil,
Alders. I got tons of alders sprouts coming up. I got to remove them. And I got a lot of cascara bark trees coming up. The little ones I'm putting in pots and probably bring them down to the plant sales, but the bigger ones, I'm going to chop them down.
It's a good reminder, John. I've got all kinds of alder myself growing in all kinds of beds. So you're right. That's going to be an interesting, at least they're easy to identify and easy to pull up. Garnet, you had something.
I was just gonna say, my temperature of my soil is barely making 50 degrees, even in my raised bed. It's still so cold out.
And Sabine, you were talking about that earlier before the meeting, right? You've had problems with germination.
Yeah.
Yes, and I did take soil temperature before I even put the seeds in, and there were 2022 seeds, and germination 100% guaranteed. The soil temperature was 55, and it is under those hoops, so it is covered for the most part. And out of 7 plants I put out, only 3 have come up. So the other 4 I just starts here at home in my in my living room, hoping the cat won't eat them. And at least 3 more are coming up. So I hope to transplant them sometime this year.
And my tomatoes look like they're really mad at me for putting them out.
We need to.
The curled like yellowy leaves, and they are not happy.
I just put mine out a couple of days ago, and so far they've been holding up. I had them in my car for a while because it was too cold outside, and here my cat will eat them. So I had my car as a mobile greenhouse, and I'm hoping they make it outside.
That could be an interesting picture for the neighbors, Sabine, with
Yeah.
your
I'd be happy to include it next time I have an article. It's like the trunk of my car is full of plants.
Okay.
Well,
Hey,
I just wanted to say, I kind of feel better hearing that other people are having some of those same issues too. I've been feeling very guilty that my vegetable garden plans just have not been progressing at all. So it's the weather.
Indeed, it is the weather, and let's just keep the fingers crossed. We know some sunshine, some warmer weathers will indeed be coming. Okay, I want to open it up for announcements and comments here, and I want to pick up with that. Just a quick comment here from about Reggie. Reggie Thoreau was one of our 2020 cohorts, and I think we saw this note here that he's actually had a very serious heart attack and is at Virginia Mason, and he was a great supporter. If for all of you who met him and worked with him at the Home and Garden Show. So I'm sure Reggie would appreciate a card or a message at Virginia Mason Hospital. Any update, Brenda, Alina, on or Jude on Reggie's health?
No, I talk to his sister just as much on a weekly basis. He's taking baby steps towards getting better, but it will be a long recovery. Once they discharge him, he'll be going to physical therapy for who knows how many weeks. So, just just keep them in your thoughts and your prayers, and you know, I'll let you know as soon as Vivian tells me more.
Is he the one that spent a lot of time in the Master Gardener booth at the plant clinic? He was,
He was there almost all days, Robin. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he stayed in the Master Gardener booth.
No, he was helpful at all over the whole pavilion place. He helped in the Master Gardener store, and he was a greeter, and he helped a lot with setup and cleanup. He was everywhere, actually.
I wish we
I-
had pictures.
Too.
Wish we had pictures of people so I could know who I'm thinking about, you know? It's so hard when we don't see anybody.
Anyway, thoughts and prayers for Reggie, and I'm sure he would appreciate a card knowing that his Master Gardener community is thinking about him.
So I would add to that, Kelly, is that I'm not sure that his fellow classmates know this information. So it would be good with whomever has got this information to pass that on to the trainees as well. They know him better than most of us do. And it would be nice if they could reach out to him as well.
Well noted. Alina, Brenda, do you want to take that action to reach out to the to make sure that the trainees are aware of this address?
Yeah, I can send that out to the trainees.
Okay.
Kelly, can you understand what Cindy said? All I get is
Yeah.
a muffled
Yeah,
voice.
Cindy was just asking to make sure that we actually get this information to the trainees themselves. And and Alina will take that action. And Alina, just as a reminder, we do have it. I do have a group email for all the trainees, but you probably have access to that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back on July 23rd, I wanted to make sure that everyone we're doubling down on the need for docents. Terry, I want to turn it back to you. Any particular is there a particular sign up or a particular recruitment process that we want to go through with respect to the docents?
Yes, Mitch Honeycutt is going to be taking care of signing up docents. So if you can help as a docent, please email her. We'll be sending out lots of emails, you know, to generate more response. There's 2 shifts that we need, 2 3-hour shifts, one in the morning from 9 to 1 and an afternoon shift from 1 to 4 o'clock. We also need help at the plant sale, which the hours are longer than the garden tour hours. So the plant sale starts at 9 o'clock and goes to 5 o'clock, so that people have a chance to shop on their way to and from the garden tour. We did that last year because a lot of people ran out of time. And so it'll give people just a little extra shopping time. So basically what we need are 3 docents per shift per garden. So that's 6 docents in each of the 6 gardens. We can always use more, but that's kind of a minimum that we really need to get help with.
So the message is reach out to Midge to sign up for a docent spot, correct?
Yes.
Very good. And Barbara, I wanted to turn this slide over to you here to talk about the plant sale.
Okay, so ditto of what Terry just said, except all of you that want to help with the plant sale, if you could email me and let me know, and I will be working the phones also. So there would be the shifts, the same shifts for Saturday. In addition to that, I'm also looking for some people to help me on Saturday, the 23rd, with setup. So that will be a little bit before that, but I've not really established those hours yet. But in the meantime, prior to the plant sale, I'm going to be asking for people to drop off their plants starting with Wednesday, July 20th. And to drop them off at my house at 2618 Sumner in Hoquiam. And then on Thursday and Friday, I can definitely use some volunteers to help with giving the plants their grooming and spa treatment so that they are sale ready. And I've not established hours on that. We'll work that as we go forward. So yeah, people are needed, and I believe that the plant sale has always been a good moneymaker, and so we want to carry on in that wonderful tradition. In addition to the Santa cans and the plant sale, there will be the hospitality table at my house, and so this is a reminder for people to be bringing cookies for that. And just is similar setup to what we did for the refreshment booth, at the Home and Garden Show. Although this is complimentary, so we are treating our customers well with coffee, water, and cookies.
And a porta potty.
And a porta potty. Well, see, that really should be one of the calling issues.
Barbara, if you could put your address into the chat as well as some of the times, that you want. And Tara, if you also could put Midge Honeycutt's email into the chat, that'd be great as well. Okay.
Okay. And it was also, I just want to say too that the address and email were in the
e-news.
Yeah. And in fact, so I will do that, Kelly. I will do that, and I'll be sending out an e-notice also.
Very good. And again, a reminder that we'll have another foundation meeting, in July ahead of the July 23rd meeting. But this is time right now to be planning and participating and signing up for it for recruitment. And of course, let's not neglect again, dividing and potting up plants for sale now. This is indeed it's a huge moneymaker, and people are eager to buy, from master gardeners. So we have always interesting stuff, and and so 1 gallon pots and 1 gallon plants. Let's make it happen. Okay, as we close out on training, I want to salute all of the trainers and their assistants and their mentors for such a long, it's been months now of it, obviously, of training as we're getting into that final stretch. And a reminder from Cindy that June 25th session is when the trainees themselves will present back to us. And so, as Cindy, I'll turn it over to you for some thoughts in here, but obviously we're all encouraged to come to hear this cohort share with us what they've learned and get themselves in the spirit of public speaking and sharing with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Kelly, for bringing this up. It's really because so many people have trouble with public speaking. I'm sorry, can you hear me? Okay.
It's very soft, Cindy.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. Oh, well, John, I'll bet you can read my lips though, huh?
Oh, your lips are below the picture thing.
Okay. Well, anyways, the point being that that since a lot of us have a fear of public speaking, most of us don't want to do this, and so I thought it would be a nice way of us supporting our incoming group of interns during training to be there and cheer them on as they do their presentations, to encourage them to want to do it again, because that's so much of what we do is share information with people, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's a classroom, but mostly we want them to have a good experience. And so that was the thought behind this. But I have since heard that the folks that would be Brenda and Elizabeth, I think, and Rhonda, they don't want us to interrupt the trainees as they're speaking. So we need to get there by 9 o'clock and come in, sit down, or by about 12:30, because the presentations themselves are going to be offered in the morning and some in the afternoon. So if we just need to get there before they start, so we're not causing any havoc when they are presenting. So, but yes, I definitely want people to come and cheer them on when they're finished.
Okay, very good. So June 25th at the Elma Fairgrounds, all are encouraged. And I would imagine, Cindy, this will actually would probably count for continuing education, would it not?
Good. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Each presentation is about 3 minutes or so long. So there are a lot of different topics. So it's a wide variety of topics for folks to talk on. So yep, it'll be like a little like 3-minute speech on different aspects of gardening that you might enjoy. So,
Very good.
thank you.
And speaking of continuing education, we definitely got the the state conference again. Reminder that the state conference is going to be face to face. It's going to be in person. It's going to be in Olympia. mglearns.org is an opportunity to sign up and participate. It'll be great to actually have a face-to-face program again. At this point, Kathleen, Karen, any comments regarding the state foundation? Any updates?
Yeah, I can give you an update if you'd like.
Please.
And yeah, our last meeting was in May 22nd. And the main topics were on the endowed chair position for horticulture to support our foundation. And right now there's about $70,000 in the fund. If we want to have an endowed chair position, we would need about 2 million, and that's going to be hard to reach. So it will come to a vote probably at our next meeting in July, and we'll see if it passes. And if it doesn't, we'll have more definite information on it after the July meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, by the way, next year, 2023 is our 50th year anniversary for Washington State Master Gardeners. So there will be a celebration, especially at the state conference in September.
Very good. That's one thing we do know how to do, Master Gardeners, well, is celebrate, regardless of weather, regardless of climate.
I have something to say to Kelly about the foundation, about the conference. We need 5 raffle items. I have 3 items. If I get more, I haven't talked to anybody about whether we can participate in the auction. The auction brings us money. The raffle brings the state money. If you remember, it's been a long time since we've had an in-person conference. So we haven't had to worry about those raffle items.
So you're asking us for raffle items or auction items? What? Can you clarify?
I'm asking for raffle items. Okay. I'm not sure. I have 3 already, but if we are able to participate in the auction, 2 of the items that I have, I think are auction items rather than raffle items, if that makes sense.
So Adine, your request to us though is for 2 raffle items. That's specifically what you're reaching out right for today.
Well, 2 or 3, yes.
2 or 3
right now.
Okay,
I'll clarify it. Well, I'm going to I have a meeting tomorrow, so I'll find out more about the auction and whether we can participate like we did last year.
Very good. So you'll be able to get that into the e-news to make sure everybody hears about it.
I will make sure I get it in the e-news. Yes, just like yes, I will.
Okay. Karen, thank you. Anything else from the state?
This is the board's committee that I'm having a meeting with. If anybody wants to nominate somebody for Master Gardener of the Year or the Ed LaCrosse Award or the Media Award, you need to get that in. I think the deadline is going to be like July 1st. It was last year.
And if anyone's interested in seeing the meeting minutes or attending the next state foundation meeting in July, send either Karen, Sharon Golightly, or I an email or give us a call and we will send you the link.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Karen. And then, of course, a final reminder here to record hours. And Alina, Brenda, how are we doing, as a foundation with respect to getting our hours in? I would imagine that a number of us had quite a few hours to contribute based upon our May work.
Hold on.
You're there, Alina.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So we are continuing to get more people involved in posting their hours. I just got a request this week from a member who'd like help in posting hours. And so I'll be helping that person. And Brenda has been working with the trainees to help them post their basic education hours. So, we are making progress. And I want to thank everybody else who is persistently putting hours in Give Pulse that I can verify. Good job.
There you go. Keep those hours coming. It's important. And as we've been talking about, it's important to keep after it, because if many weeks and many months go by, it just, it'll become increasingly difficult for us to recall what the specific hours were and the specific activities were. Okay, I'm about to turn it over to Katie and Dr. Buckley, who's joining us here today for her introduction, but I want to make sure that we captured any other and all other announcements or comments that folks want to make for the good of the order. Hearing none, I'll definitely do our introduction here to Katie. And it's a huge appreciation, Dr. Buckley, for you to join us here and for us to share. Obviously, you're talking to a tribe here that cares very deeply about what you do and very much supports all efforts at encouraging pollinator health in our habitat. And so I'm looking forward to your discussion here today, so that you have an opportunity to talk to us about the programs that you're dealing with, and how we as master gardeners not only can improve pollinator habitat and pollinator practices in our own gardens, but also how we can encourage the folks that we talk to in the public, right, to encourage better pollinator health. So please share with us.
I'm happy to. So I'm going to start off with, really, really briefly, what are pollinators and why are they important to Washington? And then go into a brief history of kind of what was going on behind the scenes, like the legislature, et cetera, and then what has the task force been up to, and basically what has come out of that. And then we'll get into a little bit more about like specifics on gardening for pollinators and how to get engaged, how to direct people to resources and stuff like that. All right, so what are pollinators? They are very, very simply just an organism that moves pollen from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower. So when I pollinate my citrus trees in January inside my house, I am a pollinator. But most of the normal ones are things like beetles, wasps, ants, butterflies, moths, flies, grasshoppers, crickets, and cockroaches, which is kind of accidental. They kind of hang around on flowers, sometimes eating them. Then you'll get birds, mammals, which is mostly bats, and unfortunately they're not in Washington, so I don't have mammals in my purview. Reptiles very rarely, and of course, bees. So why are they so important? Well, 90% of flowering plant species require a biotic pollinator. So abiotic pollinators are things like wind and water. A lot of grasses and gymnosperms are abiotic for their pollination. But most pollinators that are biotic are specialists, and they may be very tightly linked to a genus or species of plant. 75% of crop species rely to some degree on these biotic pollinators, which is estimated to represent about 1/3 of the human diet. And the only reason that that is not higher is because most of our staples are grasses and wind pollinated, or they're things like potatoes that we reproduce vegetatively most of the time. So Washington, as an example for this importance, these were some of the top crops in 2019. So without pollination, that goes down to a much shorter list. And then if we take out things that are basically never attractive to pollinators, we're left with an even shorter list. So clearly they're fairly important to just Washington agriculture. And I spend a lot of time talking about bees. There are obviously a lot of other pollinators out there. So why are bees so important? It's because they are pollinators whose food is completely provided by flowers. So butterflies, their caterpillars will eat host plants. They'll eat leaves and stuff. And yes, the adults then feed on nectar. But bees, all of their food from their larval stage through their adult stage is completely provided by flowers. So they're very important because they're all about the flowers. They're also really important because they're really diverse. We think there's there's currently over 20,000 described species of bees worldwide, so it may be a lot higher than that. This is over 500. We think there's over 600. We still don't have a good answer for that species in Washington. Most bees are solitary, they're not social. So when you think of honeybees, that is not the majority of bees. 70% of bees are nesting in the ground. There's my finger by a little hole in the ground, and 30% nest in like wood tunnels, hollow reeds, or cavities. So there's a leafcutter bee going into some hollow reeds. And there's a very large variance in size and color that people don't always think about and get confused by what a bee is. So most solitary bees do what's called mass provisioning. So they're not like honeybees where they're continuously fed. The mass provisioning, a female bee will make this big ball of pollen and nectar, and she'll lay a single egg on it in a cell in the ground or in a hollow reed. And that will hatch into a larva, and it'll feed on this pollen ball until it's time to pupate and then turn into an adult. So they provision a whole lot of different cells, and those can be kind of sequentially after one another in a hollow reed, or they can be in individual cells dug into the ground in a ground nest. So what are some bees besides honeybees? Well, hopefully you guys know about bumblebees. They're pretty big, fairly obvious, very fuzzy. There's carpenter bees, which are also pretty big, fairly obvious. Mason bees, very pretty. Leafcutter bees, sweat bees, longhorn bees, stingless bees, blueberry bees, and cuckoo bees even, which are parasitic on other bee species. So this is going to be one of the largest bees that you're going to see in this area. Well, not specifically this one, because this is an eastern bumblebee. Well, you might see this eventually if they're invasive. But this is a queen bumblebee. So this is going to be the largest bee you're going to see in this area are queen bumblebees, and they are quite large. There are, however, much smaller little bees. Some of these are sweat bees. Some of them are andrenids. There's a number of very, very tiny little bees that most people either don't notice at all, or they think they're flies. So that's a really, really little lasioglossum, which is a type of sweat bee. All right, the politics behind all of this. Once upon a time, honeybee colonies peaked in the US in about 1950, and there was a gradual decline after that until varroa mites were introduced, which saw a very sharp decline in the 1980s. In 2006, colony collapse disorder was recognized. In 2015, Obama called for a federal pollinator health task force, which, among other things, got states to put together managed pollinator protection plans. We call those MP3s for short. And we published ours in 2018. It was 11 pages long and didn't really produce any noticeable change whatsoever. However, what kind of happened after that was interesting. We had some state legislators who caught wind of pollinators as an issue, not just because of the MP3, but also because of a national state legislator organization that talks about these things. And they drafted this bill called SSB 5552, which acknowledged the importance of and threat to pollinators in Washington. It created the program that I run, it created the task force that I run, and it made pollinators one of the priorities for all state land managing agencies. So I got this job, which was super awesome because pollinators are my absolute favorite. So I started assembling a task force when I got the job back in October of 2019. We had our very first meeting on December 9th with a lot of stakeholders. We started working on a charter. We figured out a really good starting point for where we wanted to go. Basically, we stole everything from Minnesota because they're awesome. And we had 5 subcommittees on habitat, pesticides, education, managed pollinators, and research. That same week, we had discovered Asian giant hornet in the state. The week after that, we discovered that we had Houdini fly in the state, which is a kleptoparasite on mason bees specifically. So for perspective, and because I came to work on pollinators from being an invasive species specialist in the WSDA, the last time we had a significant pollinator pest or parasite or predator that was invasive that came into the state was in the 1980s with varroa mite. And the same week that the task force started, we got 2. So that was interesting. But the task force itself started humming along and discussing those issues and many others besides, and is put together of state agency representatives, pesticide applicator and producer representatives, conservation group representatives, tribal representatives, agricultural representatives, managed pollinator representatives, and many others besides, including some master gardeners. We're still running the task force, although we've switched to exactly what we're doing these days. I have over 40 members on the task force, and it is still the largest task force that our agency has ever run. So that's been interesting. But we've gotten a lot done. So we were required by the legislature to submit these recommendations, which we did, yes, over the first year of COVID. We put together about 40 something recommendations, which you can read on our website. And apparently the legislature really liked those recommendations because the following year they passed SB 5253 to implement the recommendations of the task force. It implemented about 30 something of our 40 something recommendations, which was awesome. It passed in the House and Senate unanimously. And then, most surprising, they fully funded us. So some of the parts of the bill were written like, as funding is, given to the different organizations to do this work, you can do it. And so we're like, okay, maybe we'll be able to do some of this one year and then we'll get some of it done the next year. No, they just fully funded it. So we had to do all of it all at once.
I should just pause at that point though, Katie, and celebrate that. The fact that you were given funding, not only did the legislation approve your activities, but they actually gave you some money to go do something. Congratulations.
Yes. It was very exciting and also really overwhelming once that sat in. So the next year, last year, we spent putting together this implementation plan for how we were all going to do everything. The WSDA Pesticide Management Division also put together this report on the risk of neonicotinoid pesticides to pollinators, which 5253 also required. And we got those in under deadline, yay. And then we actually started doing the things in the implementation plan while that was all happening. So I'm kind of going to go through what 5253 did. Briefly, it continued the task force. We did the implementation plan. It made it illegal to use non-native bumblebees for open field ag use. More on that later. It established a WSU pollinator extension and outreach program, complete with a fully funded position. She started 2 weeks ago, so that's very new. And one of the ones that we put in, we were like, they'll never pass this. We pulled a random number out of our butts and we're like, yeah, let's do all public works projects that include landscaping must have at least 25% of that landscaping be pollinator habitat as practicable. And they said yes. So that's now a law too.
And if I may, just going back to that last point, Katie, is that an interesting recommendation that 25% of the landscaping to be pollinator friendly? Is that an interest, just as a guide for master gardeners in terms of our communication with home gardeners preparing their landscapes? Would you recommend that to be a recommendation we should think about?
I mean, the more that they can do, the better. This is specifically all public works projects. So, you know, it's not a requirement for anybody private to do this. But oh my gosh, if everybody converted at least 25 of their landscaping to be pollinator habitat, that would be really great. Personally, I'd like to see like 100% or really close to that, but you know, let's be somewhat reasonable at the moment and just start with 25%. Yeah. So yeah, the bumblebee thing, why did we make that illegal? Well, it's because the eastern bumblebee, Bombus impatiens, is now an invasive species in the Seattle area and is very quickly spreading. And we have in the Pacific Northwest, we not only have the western bumblebee, Bombus occidentalis, that just got listed as a priority species by the state, which is basically our endangered species list. Federal listing for that may be following very soon. There is another bumblebee species, Bombus sucklei, that has been federally listed in the Pacific Northwest and has historically occasionally been seen in Washington. So non-native bumblebees can compete with native bumblebees and spread diseases. And it's basically just not a good thing. And so although we do have this one, Bombus impatiens, we'd really like to prevent any other ones and limit the spread of it as much as we possibly can. So that's the reason behind it. Bumblebees are, by the way, commonly used in greenhouses for certain types of pollination, such as tomatoes, because honeybees are really awful in greenhouses and also can't pollinate tomatoes. So it's partly why, because they're closed systems, they're still allowed to be used in greenhouses, but the colonies should be destroyed after they are used for that. All right, other things. So a lot of different groups had to do a lot of different things for this. Some of them were already doing some of these things because we were like, the WSDA Pesticide Management Division is supposed to be supporting the WSU pesticide education programs, and they already do that. So there's some stuff that they already did, like writing that report on neonics. They were already providing credits for pesticide courses on pollinator protection measures. There were or are still working on updating their penalty matrix. They've determined that the fines for that are really low these days. They're coordinating with me and with WSU during pesticide investigations and sharing findings. And these two I don't have checked, oops, previous. But they are actually working on these as well. They're just not as far along as they are on some of the other ones. They're putting in a lot more pollinator protection training for pesticide applicators, and they have this really cool drift reduction training, and they're going to be including more pollinator protection in part of that. So some other agencies, Fish and Wildlife is doing a bunch of different things like updating their riparian habitat recommendations to encourage more pollinator habitat as well. It's basically going to be an addendum to their utterly massive manual. They're looking at different restoration techniques and implementing practices on their own land to maintain pollinator habitat. The Conservation Commission has two cool things that are ongoing. One of them is a Sustain and Farm and Fields grant program, which is directed towards farmers and growers. That's going live this year. If it hasn't already, it will be shortly. That was another one that we were like, yeah, they'll never change the law on this. That was such a hassle to pass in the first place. And then they did. So any grant programs for that that create or maintain pollinator habitat will be prioritized over other grant applications. So if you know any farmers and growers that want to take advantage of a grant program, please direct them to that and tell them to include pollinator habitat. The other one will hopefully go live next year. They're still working on getting it up and running, like behind the scenes stuff this year, is a small grants program. And that's going to be providing technical and financial assistance to create pollinator habitat to basically anybody that applies. So that'll be through the local conservation districts. And hopefully that will go live, like I said, next year. They're gonna have to get that funded. But for private residences, for for corporations, for public schools, basically anybody that might be interested in putting in more pollinator habitat, they'll be able to help with that.
Katie, before you move on on that particular
Yeah.
question, is that how will we know when that particular program comes on? Is there going to be an alert that, because I would think that master gardeners could play an interesting role in terms of getting the word out to the public?
I would be happy to, it'll probably be up on our website, and it'll be up on the Conservation Commission's website. So they just had the Sustainable Farm and Fields one go live. This is their website. They have a bunch of information on it and like who to contact about concerns and putting in grant programs and stuff like that. So I'm sure it'll be on here, and I will have it on my website. I will also probably be sending out mass emails to different people about it. So yeah, we'll be trying to get the word out about it.
And while we've got a break here, I have a question from Chris, regarding the Eastern versus the native honeybee. And Shar, I know you have your hand up. So Chris, you want to ask your question real quick?
I'm just curious about the best ways to identify the Eastern honeybee, because the photo you showed us looks like a whole bunch that I've got on my lavender, and I'm just not this year yet, but I'm curious about how to differentiate them.
So actually that's a good question, and I'm gonna just go to sharing my screen really quick. So there is a place to go online that has really good information on how to identify bumblebees. And it's this Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas. They have species illustrations. And so you can see what these all look like, because unfortunately, unlike some areas, and here's the common Eastern bumblebee. So the thorax and the first terga of the abdomen are yellow. Here's the Western bumblebee over here, and it's much more striped and has a white rump. There's close to 30 bumblebee species in the Pacific Northwest. So there's an awful lot of them. This is a really good guide to get some idea of what they are, and tell them apart. I can tell you that there's some that are, oh my God, they're so darn difficult to do. Bombus mixtus is a particular one that I tend to bang my head over, because that and bifarius have variable color schemes, especially within Washington. And yeah, drive me nuts. But Bombus impatiens is pretty distinctive compared to a lot of these other ones, because yeah, only the thorax and that first terga of the abdomen are yellow, the rest of it's black. And so you look at some of these other ones, and you know, 2 abdominal segments are yellow, and it has a black dot in the middle of the thorax. Basically, this is where I recommend for you to go if you want to learn more about bumblebee identification. There's also what was that? I think it was the Washington.
That's great, though. I appreciate that.
Yeah, let's see.
It'd be really nice to have a way to print that out and be part of our plant clinic information. I mean, where people could come and look.
Yes. So I will be talking more about some of these other things, some of ideas we have for that later. But this is the other resource that I direct people to, is washingtonbumblebees.org. They have a lot more photos. They actually have a key. They have, you can kind of look bumblebees by color, so showing white, and it has really nice photos. There's Bombus occidentalis right there. The white-shouldered bumblebee. I mean, to me, those look really different. You know, one has white on its head and thorax, and the abdomen's fairly yellow, and this one has yellow at the top and a white bottom and black in between. So this is another really nice website. So I direct people to both of these. Anyway, we'll continue on. Let me go to start it up at the top. Here we go. All right. So anyway, those were other agencies that were required to do things. This is what my program was required to do, and some of these I'm either done with or they're ongoing, and I've made a lot of progress, and some I've barely started on, because at the moment I am one person, and thankfully I will be hiring people soon. But I'm going to talk about more of these in detail. So one of the first things was we were supposed to basically be figuring out what bee species are in the state, and then making it available online and with where they are and mapping them. So we have 2 teams from WSDA and WSU that are putting together all of this historic bee data from like WSU's collection and other museums and the USDA Bee Lab, and even some private collections, and they're digitizing all of that. And the end goal of that will be to have a list of the known species that were in Washington, areas that have been, you know, actually sampled, and areas that have been undersampled, and bee taxa as well that aren't really well known. Why is that important? Well, because Washington really doesn't have the best information on bee species. Oregon is in the same boat, and they've started a bee atlas. We are now starting our own bee atlas as well, and I'm really excited about this. We're starting off really slow this year with about 12 volunteers to basically beta test our system. I mean, we're mostly copying off of Oregon, but we have some differences in how we're going to be able to run it. So we're working on that this year. We did get fully funded to do this. So I will be hiring a taxonomist and a part-time technician to help run this behind the scenes. But so like, here's an example of why this is important. This right here is a photo of a male Melisodes longhorned bee. It is the most common bee species on the sunflowers in my front yard. I know what genus it is. It's a Melisodes. I have no idea what species this is. The bee taxonomist in Oregon, who has been working on the Oregon bee atlas, has no idea what species this is. And if you think that there's anybody else closer who might have an idea, well, Lincoln, the taxonomist in Oregon, was also a bee taxonomist in British Columbia. So, you know, British Columbia and Oregon, kind of on both sides of Washington. Yeah, we don't know what this is. It's the most common bee on sunflowers in my front yard. And they're just, I don't know what it is. And there's no way for me to figure it out because this particular genus is so understudied. So this is partly why, you know, we need to have more information. So I'm really excited about this project, especially because it will get me out of my house. And master gardeners are great, you know, bunch of volunteers already. You guys are more than welcome to start joining this next year if you're really interested in bees. We'll teach you how to do some really basic identification and how to collect them. And that's what my taxonomist is for. We will be identifying them down to species for you. The ones like this that we just don't know what they are, we got funding to actually do DNA barcoding. So hopefully we will finally figure out what this bee is in another year or two. That's my hope. So that's a really cool project that I'm excited about. Noxious weeds, we are working on this report. You guys may not be as interested about it, but I will put it out there. Basically, we're going to be coming up with a report on noxious weeds, if they are beneficial for pollinators, neutral, or you know, actively detrimental to pollinators, because that has management concerns. Himalayan blackberry, I know by you guys, is really invasive and really has to be controlled, but it's also a really great pollinator plant, not just for honeybees, but for an awful lot of native bees as well. So we recommend controlling it after it's bloomed, preferably before it sets seed. So there's a kind of narrow time frame in there that we would recommend control for it. And so if you're in an area that's especially concerned about pollinators, that might be where you think about stuff like that. So
Katie, just checking in on that particular point. I mean, so knotweed, right? Himalayan or Japanese knotweed, as well as Scots broom, right? Very prevalent over here in the West. I mean, so are there same recommendations you would apply there, is to treat those after bloom?
Scotch broom, I kill it all. I hate that plant. Japanese knotweed is one. That one's not as great for that we know of for a lot of the native bees, but the beekeepers really like that one. So knotweed especially is one of the plants that bloom kind of that late summer, early fall, when we just don't typically have a lot of native stuff that blooms in that time frame. So it's a difficult one because it is a really good plant for honeybees and makes really good honey, but it's so invasive in aquatic environments that, you know, blackberry does spread slowly and will take over, but knotweed is so bad that you probably don't have a choice for controlling it.
Same with yellow flagged iris?
That one I'm still waiting to see what the data is on. Irises are not typically a super important pollinator plant for most pollinators, but it may be important for some. So I don't know yet. We're still in the data collection stage on a lot of these. Some of them just have better data than others, like the blackberries and knotweed. So we're working on this, and it'll probably take us longer than we'd hoped because my poor long-suffering technician had computer issues and lost like 3 weeks of data recently. So she's having to put together stuff again. IT was not able to help her as much as they'd like. So we're working on this, and it'll come out probably in a year or two. This one you guys are probably going to be a lot more interested in. One of the things that I was supposed to be doing is educating the public through plant nurseries about the necessity for blooming nectar plants to be available to wild and managed pollinators throughout their respective active seasons. Basically, what we are doing this year is putting together these outreach materials for shelf ticklers for nurseries to use. They will get mailed out probably in July. We're working on putting a lot more stuff on our website because there are links to our website on all of those shelf ticklers, and the website will hopefully also have like short videos on safely using pesticides and creating habitat. We are looking into doing a more extensive PDF on how to create pollinator friendly landscaping, and to be determined in the future, but we're excited about this idea, a training program for both nursery staff and master gardeners, basically like a pollinator habitat short course, and doing a program like that and running that a few times a year for you guys. That is something that I will be discussing with the new WSU pollinator extension specialist. But like I said, she started 2 weeks ago, so we haven't sat down and talked as much as I'd like yet. But when I did talk to her about it, she was like, "Oh, that sounds great." So we'll be working on that and letting you know more about that as we actually get it developed. So what are some of the things that I have? And I probably should have switched this slide to the West of the Cascades version. But we have these postcards that are going out to all of the nurseries. And this is one side of the postcard with this beautiful plant layout, and our website down at the very bottom. And on the back is a plant list with when they bloom, what color they are when they bloom, to help people choose stuff. And there's a lot of these are native, not all of them are native. And so we have an east side and a west side version. And yes, it came from Oregon, but they're awesome. And it, all of the, like I have most of these plants growing in my yard here in Yakima. So these are very pretty and very good for the nurseries. These, like I said, are going out to the nurseries in July. I'm having them printed now. Some of them will be available for you guys if you want them. We will have extra. This is another one that we're working on, and it's not done yet. We've found a few typos, and the Spanish version especially needs some work. But these are also probably going to go out to nurseries at some point too. And they're kind of some of the recommendations that we have specifically around pesticides and being safe with pesticides around pollinators for home gardeners. So, you know, when you're talking to home gardeners, these are some of the things that you can push is avoid pest-prone plants. Don't spray things that are blooming. Please don't spray things that are blooming. Be careful about drift and having drift go onto blooming weeds. And then please don't use soil drench or tree trunk injections with neonicotinoids on woody flowering plants that are attractive to bees. That's specifically neonic tree trunk injections were the cause of the bumblebee deaths in linden trees in Portland, Oregon, and prompted a lot of their bee safety education stuff. So, you know, this is one of the publications that we're working on, not quite done yet, but it should be, I'm hoping, available sometime this summer. So we're working on that, and we will have a Spanish version as well. Another one, I don't know if any of you work on orchard bees, but with the Houdini fly, we are concerned about pests with them because they are becoming a more managed bee. So this is the recommendation of, you know, when you're in the middle of winter, you should go through and actually check for pests and diseases and sort out the healthy stuff and store it for release in the spring. And that will help drastically reduce Houdini fly populations, but we do have native wasp parasitoids, and we do have diseases as well that should be worked on. And I don't know if any of you recognize this really, really old brochure. We're completely redoing it because, well, it's really, really old. This is about 20 years old. So we'll be putting out a new brochure on some even more specific directions for protecting bees from pesticides. Okay, other things, we put out a beekeeper survey this winter. We got 725 responses, which was super awesome. Results, of course, were mixed, so we will be looking at next steps from that. But one of the things that will probably come out of this is getting a pesticide notification system for the state called Field Watch. Basically, beekeepers can put their hives on a map, and when a pesticide applicator is like, I'm going to spray in this area, they get an automatic notification that that's happening or will be happening. So we'll see exactly what happens, but this is something that's going on in the background. I will also be working on updating the website. At the moment, we don't have a whole lot on there. It's mostly about the Houdini fly and Asian giant hornet and the task force. If you guys are really curious about more task force related things, I have all of the meeting minutes and a lot of recordings and all of our final reports and stuff on our website on the task force page. So you can read those very, very boring things if you really want to. Something you might be more interested in, because this is eventually going to go on the website. I'm really planning on expanding the website with a whole lot of different information on like how to create pollinator habitat and use pesticides safely, and eventually, you know, a lot of bee atlas stuff and bee atlas findings and an interactive map. And this is one of those things. We're putting together this forage list for the east and west side, basically the whole state really, of mostly native plants that can be used in pollinator habitat. We'll have things like, is this a riparian plant? Is this a tree or shrub? Is it a perennial? Where is it found? Where is it from? Over here, that is not on this particular, you can't see it. It'll have what county it's in, and what pollinators like it the most, and when it blooms. Well, basically everything that I could possibly think of. I think I already have like 300 plant species on this list, and it keeps growing. So we are working on this to get it finished up, and it will go up on our website as soon as we're actually done with it. So hopefully that will be soon. So if you're having problems figuring out what plants to use, this will be a really nice resource. Like I said, hopefully I will get it on sometime this summer or fall, depending on when we actually get it finalized. Okay, so now I'm going to transition. If we want to take a 5-minute break, I'm fine with that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more specifics on what to do in the garden, and what to talk to people about when they're thinking about planting for pollinators. break? No.
No, press on, Katie.
Okay, pressing on. All right, so the main things to think about when you're trying to encourage pollinator diversity are nesting habitat, larval hosts, and nectar and pollen resources. And we'll break this down a little bit, mostly focusing on bees, but I'll talk about some other stuff too. All right, so 3 steps to encourage a diversity of bees. Well, reduce your pesticide use. A lot of hymenopterans, which are ants, wasps, and bees, are highly susceptible to insecticides. Herbicides also kill potential nectar hosts for pollinators. Not all weeds are bad. Providing nesting habitat. Sometimes that can be as simple as doing low or no till, since most bees nest in the ground. Not removing snags and other dead wood. You know, if you have a dead tree and it's not somewhere that's in danger of taking out your house, you can consider leaving it. You know, leave natural, semi-natural areas that you don't really do a whole lot to. Provide floral sources for food, and we'll get a little bit more into that. Many bee species, if they're, you know, like honeybees, require year-round floral resources. And natural, semi-natural areas provide this, along with many other things. So, and you know, you do need to consider, if you're restoring habitat or attracting specific bee species, what do you plant? And I don't really have a good answer for that at the moment. The Oregon Bee Atlas is starting to get that information. Our Bee Atlas will be working on that, but work in progress. Something else to mention that I'm not sure that I mentioned much before, certain bees are really specialists. I mean, some are polylectic, they're generalists, they'll go to darn near everything. Honeybees are great examples of that. But there are bee species that really specialize, sometimes just on one plant species, sometimes on a genus or even a subset of that genus. Most social bees are going to be generalists. And they're typically still very good pollinators because they will typically visit only a single species on any given trip. They're just going to go on their trips. They'll go to a lot of different types of plants. So most bee species are solitary. I kind of already talked about this. So nesting habitat, we used to recommend, you know, the easy way to make habitat for these leafcutter bees that nest in like hollow reeds is to do a whole bunch of, you know, bamboo and drill holes in wood. And then we found out about Houdini fly, and we were like, okay, we need to be able to actually go in and clean these out on occasion. So I am really recommending that if you want to do something like this, you use these basically removable trays, because you can open them up very easily and get in there and clean them out and harvest your bees in the fall or winter. And so that really reduces the parasite load that you're re-releasing every year, and is kind of the best recommendation that we have at the moment. But really the easiest way to provide nesting habitat for native bees is just leave some patches of bare ground. There's a nesting hole right there. It's just in the middle. This photo was taken in Florida, where the soil is very sandy, but honestly, most of these holes are very small and hard to see and don't have much of a buildup. There are bees that build sort of like these little tubes coming up from the ground, and a lot of those nest in muddier or more clay soils. So you will sometimes see sort of the little turrets coming out of the ground too, which are kind of fun to see. And this is, you know, what leafcutter bee larvae look like inside their little mass provision cells, with leaves all around them. So if you see actually little divots out of leaves, they do it every year to my peonies and my lilacs. You may not have caterpillars, you may just have lots of leafcutter bees. Honeybees. A word about honeybees. I do love honeybees. I have currently 5 hives in my backyard. They were one of the things that really got me excited about entomology when I was a kid. I love them. They're really important for modern agriculture. They are not native. So one of the examples that we use, honeybees do have issues, don't get me wrong, but they're a managed species. There's a lot of beekeepers these days that keep them, and they get medicated and they get treated for different diseases and pests. That's more their problems. A lot of our native bees have other problems, and if somebody's talking to you about, oh, I have to save the bees, and all they're talking about are honeybees, and they're like, everybody should take up beekeeping to save the bees. The best example that I have for them is if you wanted to save the songbirds, the native beautiful songbirds that live in our areas and feed on our native plants, would you raise chickens? It's basically what they are. They're super awesome, and I love honey and I love honeybees, but they're basically chickens compared to all of our native bees. So they're really cool. If you really want to do beekeeping, join your local beekeeping club. Get more information about how to do it the right way, because they do have a lot of pests and diseases that you need to be aware of to manage them correctly. But if you don't want to become a beekeeper and you still want to help bees, the best way to do that, even for honeybees, is actually to provide more habitat. Honeybees are generalists. They'll go to all of our native plants that our native bees will as well, and be perfectly happy doing that. And nutrition is actually really important for honeybees because they're generalists. They actually have to have a lot of different floral resources for a well-balanced diet. Anyway, so what do bees like? Bees honestly like a lot of different things. There's almost a bee for every type of flower, but in general, they tend to go for yellow, white, and blue or purple colored flowers, open flowers, stuff in the mint family, and stuff in the aster family, and a whole lot of everything else besides, honestly. But here's some things that won't attract bees. I love dahlias. They're very pretty, but these types of dahlias, these types of roses that have so many petals in the center, those are not attractive to pollinators. Grass, not attractive to pollinators. So if you do want to attract pollinators and you still want to have, dahlias or roses or a lawn, you can still do that. This is basically more of a wild type dahlia. It's still a very pretty flower, but you can actually see the center. A bee can see the center and actually go and get nectar and pollen from that. Same with this wild rose. This is very open and accessible and something that a honeybee or a native bee is going to love. And you can still have a lawn. You just don't want to just have grass, have clover, have violets, have self-heal, have all kinds of things that a lot of people are like, oh, that's a weed. You can have a very diverse lawn. It doesn't just have to be grass. Of course, grass is fine too, but have other things besides just grass. And honestly, I think clover lawns are the prettiest personally, and stay the greenest, especially in my area. So, do with that what you will. In general, hummingbirds like white, pink, or red flowers and long tubular shaped flowers. So I do realize that there's a bumblebee on this firecracker penstemon, but this is also a great hummingbird plant. it's red, it has these really long tubular flowers. That's like the typical hummingbird plant. In my yard, besides some of the penstemons that are like that, hummingbirds also go to stuff like, as far as non-natives like that I grow in my vegetable garden, they love my scarlet runner beans, and I have gourds that I grow sometimes that are big white flowers that are close up during the day, but in the early morning or in the late evening, they open up and the hummingbirds go to them then. Stuff like that. I have rosemint agastache. They love those. They're also a pink tubular flower, also known as hummingbird mint, should be a clue there. So just think about that. Wasps, flies, and beetles can be found on darn near everything. A lot of times they really like stuff like yarrow or black-eyed Susans that are very open. They're easy for them to access and go to. Beetles is not the best example of a beetle on a flower because that's actually a weevil. Beetles are actually the oldest pollinators. They tend to go for these primitive open flower types, and they kind of eat in there and they get really messy. And if you want a good example of like sort of this old flower type, magnolias. Magnolias are still pollinated by beetles. And there's some really cool ones out there that are very pretty, and then there's more boring ones. And anyway, if you grow ocean spray, those are just a magnet for tumbling flower beetles, and they're tiny little black beetles, and when we put traps on ocean spray, they just get covered by those. They were so attractive. Butterflies and moths. Pretty much the main thing that you can do to encourage butterflies and moths is to plant larval hosts. So this is a swallowtail. It's on desert parsley. But if you're growing stuff like dill and fennel, this is a caterpillar that you may see on those, and just, please don't kill them because they turn into swallowtail butterflies later. If you're growing these violets, I have these native violets all over my yard, in my lawn. They're just kind of honestly everywhere. Some of these little blue butterflies, and I realize that that's not blue in that photo, this is one of their hosts. So, sometimes simple things you don't really think about, and you'll probably never see the caterpillar on these because they're really tiny. You can grow as many violets as you want, and you're providing larval host food for caterpillars. Other considerations: water or mud. Honeybees especially need water. I get a lot of complaints actually from homeowners that have pools and a beekeeper right nearby saying, I get bees at my pool all the time. And honestly, that's the sign of a bad beekeeper who's not giving water to his bees. But they're not the only ones that like water. A lot of butterflies do what's called mudding, where they go to muddy areas and they're basically sponging up salts and minerals from mud. And that's especially important for male butterflies. So if you want to provide a muddy area that stays muddy kind of all the time, you will get honeybees and you'll get butterflies there pretty regularly. So this is actually a photo of kind of the same area in my yard from two different angles. And I just want to kind of go over you how I consider every element. So my lawn area is obviously totally full of clover. It's kind of hard to see on this date, but there's violets all on this side because there were violets in this flower bed and they spread into the lawn. I have flower beds that have stuff like catmint and all kinds of other things. I have fruits and vegetables. These are raspberries and blackberries, which my honeybees love, and I get native bees on all the time. I have trees and shrubs. There's lilacs over here. I have some flowering shrubs in the back area underneath my neighbor's pine trees that flower. Ground cover mulch, bare ground underneath the raspberries and blackberries. I did put a little bit of mulch, but I have these patches of bare ground right by the lawn, and I do get bees nesting in there. You can't see it, but in here I have a water faucet, and we've actually adjusted it so that it does a very slow drip into a pool of water for my honeybees, which are over on the other side of the lilac over in this area. I do not spray pesticides in most of my yard. Pretty much the only thing that we use besides neem oil and sulfur, which gets used on stuff like my husband's hops. I do have to spray our apple tree, sometimes with really harsh stuff, because codling moth is a big issue where I am. And then host plants. It actually makes me really happy. I have peonies through this flower bed. The lilacs also, my leaf cutter bees love to use those for their cells. But those violets, I know I get all kinds of butterfly caterpillars on there because I have a lot of blue butterflies in my yard. And I grow a lot of showy milkweed, for monarchs. I still haven't seen a monarch, but there's plenty of other things like beetles that eat those too. I never spray my milkweed with anything ever. You do want to tolerate some damage, and most plants will happily tolerate some damage. If they're completely chewed back to the twig, that could be a problem, but about 30% damage is totally acceptable to most plants. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you like super specific plant recommendations, because this is what I generally deal with over here on the east side is sagebrush steppe habitat, and that looks a little bit different than what you guys have on the west side. So you guys are going to have to find other sources, which I will talk about some of the other sources that you can go to find what plants to use. But how do you get started? If somebody asks you, how do I get started on putting in pollinator habitat? The first thing that you do is you look at what you already have. What do you already have in your yard that honeybees like, that bumblebees like, that hummingbirds like, that you see stuff on? Because a lot of people already have some stuff that are good pollinator plants. When we moved into our house, we've been here 5 years, I think now. Yeah, 5 years. We had 2 native red osier dogwoods in our backyard, and we get all kinds of cool pollinators on those. We have a butterfly bush, which, as long as you have a sterile variety that doesn't produce tons of seeds, that's totally fine. I get swallowtails and cool flies all over that one. There's a lot of stuff that you might already have that will work. And you still may just need to remove other things to plant what you actually want. I direct people to buy plants from nurseries. There's a lot more nurseries offering native plants these days. A lot of plant sales like you guys. We have the Yakima Arboretum that does a plant sale. A lot of conservation districts do a native plant sale. You can ask friends for seedlings or cuttings, plant seeds on bare ground, or start your own plants from seed. It's a lot easier sometimes to get native plant seeds than to actually get plants. Bulbs can be a really great option to add some more diversity, and use a combination of different methods of this. You know, that's certainly what I did. I think I've done all of these things. So what's an example? So this, all this bare ground that you can see was once covered by a giant blue spruce that somebody had topped. So it was actually a bush, and English ivy. And it took us 3 years to remove all of the ivy. Once I had, it happened to coincide like when I'd finally gotten everything removed and gotten dirt put in, and my rocks moved to where I wanted them. The conservation district had a native plant sale, so I went and picked up some stuff there. These manzanita bushes, which are really native to Northern California, not here. I picked up at the Arboretum plant sale. This very sad looking droopy yarrow plant came from my backyard where it was in a rather unfortunate position. And this coreopsis that's so beautiful back here blooming, that came with the house, and I get all kinds of cool stuff on that. So this is what I kind of started with in my blank slate. And I just started adding to it as I got other cool stuff from plant nurseries that I was visiting. So I put in some bidens, and I put in these penstemon, some goldenrod. And, you know, a year later, it was starting to look pretty good. I had, you know, my bunch grasses had finally, you know, gotten bigger. Blanket flower was kind of starting to take over. My bulbs that were onions were coming up. And, you know, it was really starting to take off. These, this is that hummingbird mint, or at least one variety of it that I started from seed. This lupin we found at Lowe's in the discount section because it looked really sad the year before. It certainly perked up at this point. And so it was starting to look really good and much more filled in and way better than English ivy. I started adding some even more stuff because I did get a few things that died off that didn't do that well. So this is showy fleabane and Oregon sunshine. You can see this leaf back here is actually some more showy milkweed because I have it everywhere. And yeah, it's turned into this really spectacular little side garden right off my driveway. And this is what it looked like this morning. I have some even more penstemons that we put in. We've pulled out some of the coreopsis because we just have so much of it that I wanted to get some more diversity in. There's that lupin that looked so sad before. This is a scabiosa that I got from my mother-in-law. And it's really started to take off. It's taken off to the point that some of those native bunch grasses that I had originally put in from that conservation district have reseeded themselves all over the place. So that's been a lot of fun. This is my other example. So, you know, if you want to convert lawn, this is one way to do it. I needed a COVID project and I needed to do something for exercise, and we had, you know, this patch of lawn had a lot of like dead patches. So I wanted to convert it to a new flower bed. This is in the back here is my apple tree that unfortunately I have to spray sometimes. I need to get that done today. I'm starting to see codling moth on it. So I used a shovel and I started by, you know, laying out where I wanted this flower bed to be and then going in with a shovel and removing sod. There are, you know, machines that do that for you, but I needed the exercise. And I removed this whole strip because I wanted to put bulbs in through here. And this area, I wanted it a little bit hillier, you know, for some interest. So I actually was laying the sod on top of it. We put in a root barrier, covered it with cardboard. I put in flags for where I wanted to eventually put in lavender seedlings. And then I stuck bulbs down wherever I wanted them. And then we mulched. So much mulch. And that's what it looked like December 2020. So I did not start my native plants inside the house. These are my vegetable seedlings. I started my native plants outside on our back patio in the fall, and they just grew or didn't grow throughout the winter because a lot of the stuff in our area needs the stratification with the cold. I really like these trays that are much deeper for the roots. Those took off a lot quicker than the shallower ones. So especially with native plants in, you know, my semi-arid area, they like having the larger root system. So in March the next year, I started getting my bulbs coming up. I realized crocuses are not native, but they're really pretty and I like them. We also moved my husband's rhubarb plants. I say my husband because he loves rhubarb a lot, to this area next to the driveway, because we were like, well, we probably shouldn't grow lavender right next to the driveway because that's where we pile our snow and the rhubarb dies down in the winter. So the rest of it, where the blue flags are, that got planted with lavender later. So there's a tiny little lavender, and I put in some sunflowers too that were really short variety because it's right next to the road. I managed to find these blue alliums and camas in my local nursery as bulbs. So I put those in. I was really excited about that. And then I started planting in, you know, those little native seeds that I had grown on my back patio. I wasn't really expecting a whole lot of them to bloom the first year because they were basically all perennials. But this little penstemon started blooming first. And I had several waves of planting as stuff actually got big enough to plant out. So by, you know, July last year, they were actually starting to get decent sized. I had a liatris that came up because I have one that has apparently seeded itself in a few places. And when I transplanted the lavender on the other side of this that you can't see, I apparently got a liatris with it too. My sunflowers were very popular with the bees as well. I had one final planting at the end of July last year, and more stuff was blooming. This is another hummingbird mint. Yeah, the Agasache rose mint. It's very cute, smells great. You can use it in tea. Fireweed that has gone absolutely crazy. I think it's seeded itself in already. Black-eyed Susan that was blooming, Pearly Everlasting. Lots of different coreopsis and penstemons. And this is one of my favorites, Blazing Star. It's native over here, sorry guys. It really does not like it wet. So again, you know, I started December 2020 with basically mulch. This was last year. This was last week. and this is this morning. The penstemons of several different varieties have really taken off. I have blue flax that's blooming now, that's a native, several bunch grasses, and this yellow is more Oregon sunshine. These are all, by the way, mostly plants that really did not need to get watered, but we watered them in pretty extensively last year, and the rains this year that we don't normally get in our area have prompted a significant amount of growth. I have a lot of these species growing in a different area that gets no irrigation whatsoever, and they're like half the size. So that's been an interesting experiment. And I will say I had one great disappointment. This was my one species that I didn't get any germination of, is this Monroe's Glow Mallow. That's native to this area. It's very bright and cheerful orange. And we have a native specialist species on it, the Glow Mallow bee. It's super cute, and I want to see if I can get it here, but I won't get it here unless I can grow globe mallow. So I'm still working on that. But so, you know, if people ask, how can you help? How can I help? How can I create pollinator habitat? Plant more flowers, preferably native plants. Create habitat like larval host plants and nesting habitat. You know, don't till as much as you can. You know, leave some areas that aren't mulched. Use IPM. You know, don't spray if you don't have to. Use the softest pesticide you can. Do not spray plants when they're in bloom. That's usually against the label anyway. If you have, you know, a lot of weeds, this is more directed towards growers that are blooming, you know, mow them down before you spray, because the bees won't come in if there aren't any flowers. You know, avoid herbicide treatments during key blooms. Plant more flowers, really plant more flowers, and trees and shrubs count. And then, you know, learn more about your local pollinators. Something else that I tell people all the time that you guys can, you know, pass on, please, is pesticide reporting. If you see a bee kill, if, you know, you have bees and you suspect that they've died from pesticides, please immediately contact the WSDA pesticide compliance, because testing is very time critical. We have websites, or we have phone numbers posted online. The email is pcompliance@agr.wa.gov. We really cannot help if we don't know that there is a problem. And remember, the pesticide label is the law. You do need to follow it. But there's a lot more places that you can go online. A lot of these places can help you figure out what is native to your area if you do not already know. I send an awful lot of people to the Xerxes Society because they have really great how-to guides on how to create pollinator habitat with a lot more detail even than I've gone into. If you want to know more about hummingbirds, direct them to the Audubon Society. The Pollinator Partnership has these really handy dandy guides based on your ecoregion with plants and how to put in pollinator habitat. The Native Plant Society is really great for, you know, learning more about native plants and where you can buy them. Actually, I don't have this on here, but the Burke's Herbarium is, I want to say, a UW thing, but that's a really great place to learn more about native plants as well. They have some really nice maps for quite a lot of native plants on exactly where they're native to, which is pretty nice. Your local conservation district, yay, we like those guys. And they will be where the grant programs are going to be through, hopefully next year. The Woodland Park Zoo has, you know, their own pollinator garden and a lot more information on how to create those. They have a butterfly house that might even be open this year. And then there's the Washington Butterfly Association. If you desperately want to know more about butterflies and go hang out with a bunch of other people who like to talk about butterflies a lot. And then new in the last year or so, the Washington Native Bee Society, which are going to be working with me very heavily on the Washington Bee Atlas. So they meet once a month online. And if you want to nerd out about native bees, that's where you should go. Do you guys have any other questions?
You know, Katie, it was great seeing the example of actually transforming your lawn and your yard, right, you know, into a pollinator habitat. Because I can appreciate the fact that you've now set an example for your neighbors and your neighborhood, you know, as to what can happen. Karen, I see you have your phone, your hand raised.
I do. I want to know if that thing that list that she had up there can be made available to us. Can you send it to us on our email so that we can print it to have?
The forage list or the list of resources?
The list of resources. It would be, I do plant clinics. Having something like that would be really, really nice for us. If people come to us and say, hey, how can we do this?
Yeah, I will happily send you guys like a PDF version of this presentation.
That'd be
you can-
great,
Oh, that
Katie.
would
Yeah.
be so awesome. Thank you.
If you get that, if you can get that to me, Katie, we'll get it out.
Yeah, I will do that.
Chris, you had a question.
Yeah, if you've got to spray, if you absolutely have an insect you must get rid of, just make sure nothing is flowering around it where you're going to spray.
Yeah, that's kind of one of our recommendations, or, use a method to spray it that's not going to cause a lot of drift. Something else that you can do is if you have a spray that has a really short lifespan, so it dissipates really quickly. If you spray it in the evening after it started to get dark, most bees don't fly at night. And it'll have mostly dissipated by morning. That obviously doesn't work for stuff that has a really long residual time. But for stuff with a really short residual time, that's what we recommend, is to spray in the evening.
Okay.
John, you have your hand up.
Yes, I wondered if you've taken into account global warming and what types of plants you're recommending.
To some extent, yes. This is partly why I recommend a lot of native plants, is actually because of global warming. At least on this side of the mountains, a lot of our native plants are very drought tolerant. So if we get a year like last year where it is really, really hot and really dry for extended periods of time, a lot of the native plants, at least on this side of the mountains, are adapted to that and don't really have significant problems.
Yeah.
The
trouble is that on the Western Washington, there are already native plants that are starting to suffer and drop out.
Yes. And so I would actually kind of recommend that, when you're looking at that that forage plant list that I'm putting together, there are quite a number of species that are native on both the east and the west side. You might want to consider growing some of the stuff that's native to both, because it will, adapt to some of that drought tolerant, those droughts a little bit easier. And yeah, global climate change is definitely a factor. It's one of the reasons why we're seeing more invasive species. Just one, global interconnectivity and travel is another really big one. But with what plants we choose, for my side of the mountains, water is one of the biggest issues. You guys are going to be seeing, with more extreme temperatures and maybe less water some years, you might be closer to some of our conditions on some years. It's, at least in the summer anyway. I recommend growing a really wide variety of different plants a lot of the times, mostly because that's one of the best ways to help the most types of pollinators, is to just have a really big diversity. And if you're doing that, you may have some plants that suffer really badly sometimes, but on the whole, you might have a lot of plants that do okay. And it's kind of hedging your bets, which is honestly what I do with gardening every year. I always have some experiments going, especially in my vegetable garden. I try something new every year, and sometimes it works out really well and sometimes it really doesn't. And if it doesn't, then I, maybe try that plant in a different spot next year, or try a different variety. And if they still do not do well, then I just don't grow it.
As with all of us, that's for sure. Other questions for Katie?
Yeah, I have a question. Katie, you showed us some wonderful handouts or flyers or posters you're developing. Is there a way we could know when they're available and either see them online or get copies?
Yes, I will be, when we actually get all of those finalized, I will be sending out an email that will hopefully get distributed to all the master gardeners with all of those as PDFs. So we will be making them available. If different county master gardener stations request copies of them, we should have enough of an excess to be able to share with you guys.
Most excellent. What do you have any, because those handouts will be incredibly valued, you know, at at our clinics and our outreach efforts, Katie. So we can't emphasize enough how important that is to get those to us.
Yeah. It will happen, I'm hoping this summer, this fall at the latest. It's going faster in some ways than I thought it would with getting those edited and finalized. So.
And a quick follow-up. I mean, who is the WSU pollinator coordinator? You said they're just recently started. Who's that individual?
It is Kelly Koholnek. Yeah, she just started like 2 weeks ago.
And she's based where?
She's based at the WSU Bee Lab in Othello and the Prosser Research Station. Although technically currently she's still living out of Pullman because her husband, I think, is finishing up his degree there. So she will be traveling a lot.
Indeed, she will. Other questions for Katie?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just recently bought a spray to kill weeds and it's called Burnout. Have you heard of it?
Nope.
So it says it's clove oil and orange oil.
Okay.
And it was, wouldn't hurt anything. And so I thought, well, I'd give it a try. And my goodness, it killed stuff so fast. I've never seen anything kill anything so fast. I literally sprayed weeds in my path and in my driveway. And within about 4 hours, they were just totally brown. And I never saw anything work so fast. And it smells really good. It smells really strong of cloves. So I just wanted to make sure that was okay. I mean, it seemed like it was perfectly natural.
People make that mistake an awful lot. There are a lot of things that are natural that are not exactly non-toxic.
Yeah.
But that sounds like it's probably okay. Just, maybe don't spray it like on bees as they're flying.
Oh, I wouldn't. Yeah. Well, I don't ever spray anything that's flowering anyway.
Yeah.
Always make sure it's knocked down before I spray it. But I just want to know if you'd heard of it. And
no, not that specific one. I am not the pesticides expert. That's what we have the pesticide management division for. There's like 20 of them, and they're who I run pesticide stuff past. One of the nice things about bees is they actually do have a pretty strong sense of smell. So if you are spraying stuff that's like essential oils like clove and orange oil, they can smell that and they'll avoid it if they think it's bad for them.
Good.
Katie, thank you so very much for this tremendous amount of information here. And could you go ahead and put your contact information in the chat, because we won't hesitate to annoy you with our questions and our rants. Final questions for Katie.
I just wanted to ask, if we spray during the evening to avoid injuring any bees or other pollinators, what about moths? Moths are pollinators and they might be out in the evening.
They are. And if you're growing a lot of night blooming plants, which is a thing, like I said, those the gourds, they bloom at night. They actually close up during the day. Hummingbirds do really like them and will go to them in the early morning and the early when it's still light in the evening, when they've opened up, but really those are mostly pollinated by moths. If you're growing a lot of stuff like that, yeah, you probably shouldn't be spraying those plants specifically in the evening. You'd want to do it in the morning or after they've closed up for the day. So yeah, that is absolutely a consideration. But pollination ecology could be a graduate level course that would take me at least a semester to go over in depth. You know, you do need to look at like when things are blooming, when is stuff coming to them. There are plants that produce more nectar in the morning and taper off in the afternoon, and there are plants that have their peak in the afternoon, and bees will take advantage of that change in resources. So, you know, just by pure observation, you can go out and be like, okay, what time of day is this plant being really attracted to insects right now? And it's not later. You know, you can just watch and see and wait for that lull in activity. But you really shouldn't be spraying stuff when it's in bloom anyway.
There you go. Key lesson to learn from here is for sure. Avoid the bloom spray.
Yeah.
Katie, thank you so very much. Best of luck for your garden, you know, and best of luck
Thank
for
you.
all the activities you've got. Congratulations on getting funding for the task force, right? You know,
Yes.
and there's a lot coming up, and we assure you, obviously, you're preaching to the choir here with respect to we understand the importance of this, and we certainly are we intend to fulfill our mission as WSU master gardeners here to extend this gospel of pollinator friendly habitat right to the universe. We will evangelize.
Excellent.
Okay. Anything else for anything else for Katie?
Karen, do you have your hand up?
If I do, it's a mistake, but
Okay.
but thank you, Katie. This has been just awesome.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. I would probably be doing this stuff anyway in my yard, but I probably wouldn't be taking as many photos of it regularly to track the progress. So I am planning on doing a publication on the website with like how I did it, materials and approximate costs and stuff. So somebody can replicate it if they really want to in slightly more detail.
And then, of course, all you have to do, Katie, is just have your west side house and your west side landscape, right? Work
I
on
need to
that.
find
Okay.
somebody who does
that.
the same thing that I do and take a lot of photos of their progress. So,
Katie, thank you so very much, and I want to thank everyone for hanging in there. Right, you know, this is incredibly important information, and Katie's got her contact information out there, so don't hesitate to reach out, and don't hesitate to tell people, right, that there is a, you know, that WSDA as well as WSU, we're all very concerned about pollinators here and so forth. Rick, you have your hand up real quick.
Yes, I just wanted to tell Katie that I've been a master gardener for 22 years, and this is one of the best presentations we've ever had in Master Gardeners, and I would like to thank her for what the information she relayed to us today. And it really applies to our demonstration garden at the Elmo Fairgrounds, and we will apply it even more than we're doing right now. Thank you very much for this presentation today.
thank you. And yeah, feel free to spread it around to the other counties if they want me to come talk to them. I'm happy to do that. You know, this is one of the fun parts of my job. I get to show you my garden, talk about bugs.
Hey, thanks, Katie. And thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now as we finish the meeting.